Welcome to the Industry Experts Panel at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com. My name is Michelle Holliday. Today, we are honored to be welcoming back to the show the legendary Mr. G. Edward Griffin. Ed is the author of the book The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is a notoriously famous expose upon the Federal Reserve System. He has been exposing the Fed since the 1960s and states that it constitutes a banking cartel. Edward has been an investigative journalist throughout all of his career. He has interviewed some of the most notorious people in the world. He is the author of 48 books and the founder of the Red Pill University. We are excited to have him back today to talk about what is playing out across the planet at this moment in time, which he has been warning everyone about for decades. Edward, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
Well, thank you, Michelle. I'm doing very well, and it's a pleasure to be back on your show.
We are so thrilled to have you here, so honored every time you appear. Today, of course, is Tuesday. It is December the 1st, 2020, and we have just watched what is starting to be described as the most fraudulent and criminal action that has ever taken place inside our country, which was the presidential election of November 2020. We now have a media, Ed, that has convinced half of America that Joe Biden received more votes than anyone in American history because the TV says so. The mainstream media, it's all there. And Ed, I want to go back actually to an interview that you conducted back in 1983 with a Soviet dissident from communist Soviet Union named Yuri Bezmenov. And the phrase ideological subversion, it was him warning about a very long-term plan for America. Talk to us about what that means and what has happened.
Yes, that would be a delight to do that. Yuri Bezmenov was quite an interesting character. As you said, he was not just a Soviet dissident, he was a defector. He was a high-ranking officer in the KGB. Back in the days when the KGB was, as the word today is, notorious, boy, KGB in those days, probably still today, its predecessor is doing pretty much the same, but it's more genteel, it seems, in terms of what they call the wet operations, meaning the killing, the murders, the assassinations, and that kind of thing.
What was that term, the wet
They
operation?
call them wet operations, W-E-T, I suppose, because of the wet blood that is associated with it. It's kind of a crude term, but that is a term I discovered that is commonly used in all of the so-called security agencies of around the world. Those are called wet operations. They have different code names for things like that, like propaganda and subversion and the honeypot and things like that. The honeypot would be something where you would deliberately put out some information that you know your opponent is seeking. So you sacrifice giving up that information through one of your agents who appears to be a friend of your enemy because he's giving them the information they seek, but that is only to build confidence in the agent, so that the next time he gives information, it'll be very important disinformation and will lead you into the wrong areas. So they're willing to give up a minor piece of information in order to get you to believe the major lie. That's called the honeypot, things like that. So they have these phrases. It was interesting to learn them, not just from Yuri, but from other defectors I've had a chance to talk to, and people from our own intelligence apparatus as well. But Yuri was a classic case. His father was a high-ranking general in the Soviet army, and so he was born into a family of rank and privilege. And you talk about the communist revolution supposedly overthrowing the exploiters and the class system, the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots and all that. We're going to go to communism and socialism and get rid of all of that. Well, of course, when they do succeed, like they did in the Soviet Union, the class system is worse than ever because you're born into it. If you have rank, if you're a commissar or a general or some high-ranking position within the Communist Party, you live like royalty, and you have the dakas, I think they call them, their villas in the country, their chauffeurs, their limousines, their the banquets, the clothing. They don't have to buy anything. Money isn't important. They just go out and order it, and oh yes, yes sir, here it is, and the finest food, and they get to travel around the world, and they don't have to pay for anything. So, and meanwhile, the people in the Soviet Union were starving and dying and so forth. And that's always the case under any form of collectivism, of course. Communism and socialism is just one form of collectivism. It was also true under Nazism and fascism. All of those isms were just aspects of different variants of collectivism. That's how it works, even though the slogan is that we're going to get rid of the rich and the poor. We're going to give everybody the equal opportunity and equal status, and everybody will have an equal outcome. And that is laughable, because when you look at those systems, it's just the other way around. I mean, the most bizarre capitalist wealth that you could imagine is enjoyed by the commissars and the Nazi leaders, and in China, the one that's communism, right? And yet those head of the party live like royalty and so forth. So I digress, of course, but so I learned a lot of this from Yuri Bezmenov, who was born into a high-ranking family, had everything you could possibly imagine. He lived very well. They really didn't have to work hard, but they offered him, a position in the KGB, naturally, and because he was the son of a general, and he wasn't very happy about it, he says, and I don't think that was just after the fact. He from getting to know him, I think he was telling me the truth, but that's what you almost had to do. If you didn't accept that, you'd be in trouble. So anyway, he was in the KGB, and his primary assignment for most of his life was to hoodwink journalists from around the world that visited the Soviet Union. This is back in the 50s and 60s. American journalists or Indian journalists from India or China or anywhere around the world, mostly the Western world, France and Germany, they would visit the Soviet Union to see, is it really bad or is it good? What is it? Go visit it, right? So they send their newspaper reporters and their magazine journalists, and they go, and they land in Moscow, and they get their permit to come. And Yuri's job was to meet him at the airport, take him to the hotel, put him up in a nice room, show them around town, buy them dinner, get them lots of drinks, get them drunk, keep them drunk, as he said, as much as possible, and show them whatever they wanted to see, supposedly. But whatever they wanted to see, it was phony. I mean, they rigged it so that the poor journalists never really saw the real Soviet Union. If you wanted to see a prison, oh yeah, people want to see a prison. Well, take it to a prison not too far from here. And of course, it was a model prison. It was not one of the standard prisons at all. It was like a Hollywood set, and they had prisoners, and it was very nice. They ate well. They looked like they were, comfortable.
It was
Well, they were
fake.
prisoners. It was fake, yeah. And then there were, what about? They say that religion is outlawed here, right? And, well, of course not. Oh, that's just capitalist propaganda. I'll take you. A wedding going on in church today. We'll go see wedding. So there's a wedding goes on at the big Christian church in the middle of Moscow. It's the only one in the whole country that was operating. But the priest was
And
a
it was
member
only Christian for that day.
for that, yeah, for that hour or whatever. And yeah, there was a marriage that took place, and it was a priest there, an Orthodox priest. Oh no, a Catholic priest, I guess. Anyway, either Orthodox or traditional Catholic, I've forgotten, but it was a Christian denomination. And of course, the priest was an actor. He was a member of the Communist Party. The bride and the groom were actors. They got married 2 or 3 times a week. Every time it's the same bride and groom, and they had the same party, and the same guests came, and they had the band, and they danced and drank champagne and had a cake. And the journalists would take pictures, say, oh, this is a Christian wedding right here in the middle of Moscow. It was all that kind of thing.
So you're saying the government actually set up a fake venue for reporters around the world to come and see this is our country?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Standard operation. And that's, we've heard about things like that, but when you talk to the man, did it. He was in charge of it. He was the key point man for that. And he shows you photographs and everything. And he just laughs and tells you about it and gives you details. You know you're talking to the real guy here. And he risked his life to get out of Russia. He had an assignment in India as an agent, and that's another story talking about how they were setting up the people in India so that when they finally came to power, but all of those that supported them and helped them come to power would be murdered because they knew that those were the idealists who really fell for the propaganda. And when they find out that when communism comes to power, it's not what they thought it was going to be, they'll become their enemies. And he said, so the first ones they have to get rid of in a putsch when they finally come to power, and they go around picking up people and to get rid of them. The first ones they get will be the leaders of the opposition against communism, but the second rank will be all the suckers. He called them there's this favorite phrase from Stalin, the useful idiots, they called them, the useful idiots, the ones that helped them come to power, thinking that, communism, socialism is going to be so good for the lower class people, the common man, it was going to be so much better than capitalism. They knew that those people were going to be shocked when they find out that that's not going to be the way, so they have to kill them next. And so, it was just a fascinating man. And of course, he's not the only one that has said these things. That's fairly common from defectors out of the Soviet Union and even in China and Cuba and so forth. It's the same wherever
And
communism
I
comes to
have to
power.
say, this is just like what's happening today, where they have a bunch of useful idiots who really believe that bringing
Um,
socialism, which is the hallway to communism,
mhm.
into our country is going to be, you know, everybody will have everything for free and just be the rich that pays for everything.
Yeah,
You
there'll
know what
be
I
no
mean?
rich.
It's
There'll be no
so
rich anymore.
there'll
Yeah.
be no rich. Ed, with what happened in Venezuela, and for the people of our country to be so uneducated. People are not stupid. People are not heartless. They are just unaware. And just to really nutshell for everyone what he's speaking of and what happened in Venezuela very quickly. Venezuela was a very rich resort, right? Up until
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
1990s.
Hmm.
And everyone in the world would come there. It's absolute capitalism, huge hotels, just fabulous lifestyle. Socialism came in. Hugo Chavez came
Hmm.
in with what looks like was a Dominion voting system that voted him in. And
Yeah.
he was the socialist, and he was going to give free education, free health care, free insurance,
Hmm.
monthly income to everyone. Everyone was going to be fabulous. And it was the people that were the workers that had watched the rich come and go in their country, that were so excited. It was like, we don't have to serve these rich anymore.
Hmm.
The rich will all pay for it. They'll be
Yeah.
taxed 50 to 60%. And the first thing that happened was the rich left.
Well, the ones that could get
And then
out. Yeah. Hmm.
and took all the factories and all the hotels
Uh-huh.
and everything. And so now
Uh-huh.
there's no jobs, nothing for anyone to do, and the government still has to pay these monthly incomes. So they print the money into worthlessness, and then they run away because now they can't import
Yeah.
any bread or anything for anyone, and they can't
Hmm.
pay any monthly bills. So they know they're going to be lynched by the mob. They run away. Now those people are left. 6 years it took. Those
Hmm.
people are left with no jobs, no food, no income, no gasoline, because there's no gas trucks coming in to fill up the gas stations. There's no food coming in for the food stores and the grocery stores. They have absolutely nothing and no way to get out because they've got no gasoline. And the only people that are surviving are criminals with guns. And you think you have storage, they'll come in and they'll take your storage in a snap. They have apps. They are literally kidnapping their neighbors' dogs to
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah. This is not just Venezuela. This happens everywhere that collectivism comes to power. It's kind of like a parasite um, on a tree. I think of that because I like to go up in the middle California, and you get out of the city and you see all these beautiful California oak trees. There's live oaks and the green. I mean, all kinds of oaks, and they're beautiful, masterful trees. But certain times, sort of toward the end of the year, you see what they call the Spanish moss growing on them. It wasn't that nice, the Spanish moss on the oak trees. Well, the Spanish moss, of course, is a parasite, and over a period of time, they'll just sap all the life out of the oak tree. That mighty oak will just right in the, sort of in the middle of its youth, you might say, it's struck down and it dies. And of course, then the Spanish moss can't survive either, so the Spanish moss is gone. But
Right.
there's enough of it left on the new trees coming up, and so it's an infection of a parasite. Collectivism is a parasite. It doesn't produce anything. It just draws its lifeblood out of the tree, so to speak. And we are the trees. And they suck all the energy and all the blood out of us, and we're left, dead. And okay, so that next tree, and then finally when all the trees are dead, well, then the parasites are gone too, but it's a horrible process.
It's
It's
just
not,
incredible.
it's not,
These people are insane to believe that someone who's, oh, he makes 20 million a year, he can survive on 6 million, give us the rest. you know, he's the one that owns the factories that puts you to, that gives you your job so you can pay your rent, so your landlords can
yeah,
survive and pay their mortgage, and you buy the food and the flower shops and the catering service and everything. This guy leaves, the
it's
whole
all through.
town
Yeah,
falls. That's what they
yeah.
don't get. And the rich are not just going to sit there and be taxed. If you say to someone, I'm going to take all your money and you're rich, so you could move to Sweden, but if you stay here, I'm going to take 60%, the guy's going to move to Sweden. This is the worst plan I think I've ever heard of. And Ed, it keeps repeating itself through history.
Mhm.
And all people who don't know about it get is the information everything's going to be free,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
rich are going to pay for it. It's
Hmm.
the same.
It's the same story over and over again, and it works. It's like uh, a tennis player that's got a really snappy serve. When he serves that ball all of a sudden spins off to the side, and if you got a great serve, I'm told that's the most important part of the tennis game is being able to serve the ball well so that your opponent can't tell where it's going to be to hit it back. Well, if you got the same serve, you can keep using it over and over and over again, and even though people are aware of it, it's hard to figure out what you're doing. But if you are not even aware of it, if you're a first-time player, come up against a seasoned tennis player with a twisty serve, you're through. I mean, you fall for it every time. So
Right.
that's it,
He's doing the same serve. He's just looking for the sucker, the next sucker, next sucker, next sucker. And
right?
this,
And
our
they're all over the
country looks
place.
like we're a bunch of suckers. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's that phrase? If you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it, or
Yeah,
something like that.
yes, it's said in different ways, but that's about it. Those who know not history are doomed to repeat its mistakes, and so
So
yeah, it's
what
true.
what's your take? I mean, I want to go back to Yuri, but Ed, what is your take on this presidential election? Do you think Biden's going to win? What's your opinion about Trump? And is this the plan that Yuri was talking about, I guess, is the question.
Well, this is definitely the latter stage of the plan that Yuri was talking about, which he calls the crisis stage. Well, that's not the last. The crisis stage is the second to the last. That's where everything goes twang and everybody's panicky. There's violence, there's chaos, there's hatred, there's blood in the streets, and then that leads to the final click over when people are so desperate and scared that they're not worrying about whether something is legal or not. They're not worrying about whether it's constitutional or not. They say a drowning man is not interested in the Constitution. And people who are fearful for their existence, their lives, uh, even the physical safety in their homes, if they're fearful of everything, you say, well, this is unconstitutional. They're not interested in your argument. All they want to know is, I want to be protected. I want to get out of this mess. So that's the crisis stage that Yuri was talking about, and we're definitely in that now. I mean, and we're
He
just
laid out
coming.
that plan for you, didn't he?
Oh,
I
he
watched
did,
that
yeah,
interview.
yeah. And this goes way, way, way back. And of course, he learned it as a young man too. It was taught to him in the schools in Russia.
Tell everybody
And
the plan, Ed. Tell everybody
well,
in a
if I can
nutshell.
remember the stage, the first one is demoralization, and that's more or less the propaganda
And talking
phase.
about coming into our country and doing this to our country. Okay, go ahead with the
Mostly
steps.
through the educational system. The object is to capture the minds of the youth, and the best way to do that is in the schools, because Americans and everybody else sends their kids to school, right? They don't teach them anymore. And they say go to school. That's what we pay taxes for. So they go to school. So knowing that, collectivists, not just the Nazis, but all collectivists, even many of whom call themselves Americans, that's what happened here. The collectivists didn't call themselves communists, but they believed the same thing. We're talking about the Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, and the Rockefeller dynasty. They spent millions of dollars to take over the educational system of America at the turn of the last century. Millions and millions of dollars back in the day when $1 million was a lot of money. And they bought up the college professors. They gave grants to the universities. They had requirements that the textbooks had to be written to teach collectivism. That's all. And they boast about it. If anybody doubts anything I'm saying, you might want to come to our website, which I could talk about later, and see the documentation of what I'm saying, where these people themselves talked about what they were doing. It's not me saying so. I'm just quote what they wrote and what they did. Anyway, so it wasn't just the communists that do this sort of thing. They know that if you could capture the school system, which is easy with money, because teachers are always looking for higher pay, right? And we need money to build the buildings and to print the textbooks, and the authors of the history books have to be paid and so forth. Money really turns the wheel on a lot of things, and especially in education. And they took it over. They took it over back in the 1920s. Yeah, they had it totally. They
Our
started off.
education system.
Oh yeah, right. And that's what Yuri was talking about. He didn't mention the Columbia University and the Teachers College, which is what I'm talking about. But that was all taken over by American, quote, capitalists like Carnegie and Rockefeller. Are these communists? No, no. But they believe the same as communists, you see. It's collectivism. And we'll come back to that maybe, but it doesn't make any difference what name you put on it. If it's collectivism and you feel the state has to dominate and control everybody's lives
What is
for their
collectivism, Ed?
well,
Define it.
collective, yeah. Thank you. I use the word as everybody knows what it means, and I'm not trying to be facetious. I didn't know what it meant for most of my life either, until I started reading some of the old books. But collectivism is an ideology. There are many aspects to it, but the most fundamental of which is that these people believe that the group is more important than the individual, and that the individual must be sacrificed if necessary for the greater good of the greater number. That's kind of their mantra. For the greater
But
good. We've got to do all these things, but it's for the greater good. And all the major atrocities of modern history have been done in the name of the greater good. We're doing this because it's going to be good for you or good for society or good for the world in the long run. They
and it
start
seems to me
wars
it's the
because it's for the
people,
greater good.
right, the people at the top who are not affected by it, who are getting all the money from it. It's sort of a sales pitch more than a
Exactly.
real.
It's a gimmick. It's a gimmick, exactly. And they teach it in schools. I was taught it in schools. As a kid, I thought it was a great idea. The greater good or the greater number. What's wrong with that? Well, that's democracy, isn't it?
It's not democracy. It's the
And that's the,
opposite. Democracy is everybody, you stand on your own. We are capitalism. That's why everybody wants to come to our country from these socialist and, communist countries, because
yeah.
it's like, well, I can build my own career there, and I can,
Mhm.
have a
Yeah.
store, and I can do things like that. You got to listen to what these people are saying. What they're telling you is in their country, they
hmm
could not do that. They were locked down.
hmm
People were dying to escape the
Yeah.
Soviet
Yeah.
Union, right? It was very
Well, that's
dangerous.
right. So that's collectivism, and communism is merely one of the forms of collectivism. Socialism is another one. Fascism, Nazism, and our country today is built and being driven by collectivism. There's very little difference anymore on the ideology that drives the government of the United States, or France, or England, or China, or Russia, or Cuba, or any of that. They have these labels. I'm a communist. I'm a fascist. I know I'm a Nazi. I'm a Republican. No, I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal. No, I'm a conservative. They use all these words. And those words mean nothing. They can't even be defined. But when you get to the words of collectivism versus individualism, now you're talking about something with a definition. And I'm here to tell you that all of the major countries and most of the minor countries too are today run on the principle of collectivism. And it's no different than what they had in the Soviet Union in the day that Yuri Bezmenov was there. It is no different. And And that's a shocker. I mean, I did not want to believe that. You know, I'm a true American. I'm born into the free enterprise system. I thought we had free enterprise. I thought we had capitalism. And then I realized that no, we talk about capitalism as though we had it, but America was turned socialist starting in World War I to fight the war. We gave up a lot of our liberties, but had a war, you know. And by the end of World War II, the United States was totally collectivist. And we didn't call it socialism, but look, we had progressive income tax, people had welfare, everything that you looked for in a communist system we already had at the end of World War II. And we thought we were anti-communist and anti-socialist. We called ourselves capitalist. But by that time, the markets were controlled. They even had, you know, controlled prices for a while, and then they gave that up. But then the Federal Reserve started to put money into certain sectors of the economy to change the balance. I mean, everything about the government since World War II has been to control the economy or to control the people or to control perception. It's all about control, control, control. And that's when the media gradually became absorbed into the government. There's no difference between government and media anymore. They appear to be different, but the thinking of the people and the apex of leadership in both groups, they think the same. They all have the same collectivist viewpoint of the world, and they have the same political goal, which is the building of an international collectivist system that they call the New World Order. That was their phrase for it. I just call it, it's a world government based on the model of collectivism. And they all agree with that. The people in the press, the people in the labor unions, the people in the school system, the people in the Kiwanis Club, the people in the churches, people in government. Everybody in America believes that collectivism is the greatest thing. You got to do it for the greater good of the greater number. They all believe it. And so this is how we got there. And this started in the schools. And that's what Yuri was talking about. The first step for any collectivist system, whether it's communism or any of these other variants, is to capture the control of the schools so that you can teach the principles of collectivism in the schools like they taught it to me, that the end justified the means if it was for the greater good of the greater number, and that the rights came from the state, and you know, the whole list of things that come under collectivism, that if you want something done, you have to force people to do it. You can't give them free will to do it because otherwise they might not do it. And so for the greater good of the greater number, you have to force people to do what they should do. And who decides what they should do? Well, you do, of course, because you're the ruling elite. And it's all those things. So what I'm trying to say is that Yuri Bezmenov was telling us in that interview that the KGB understood this very well back since the end of World War II. They started in the 1940s. They were infiltrating the United States government and the school system, the media and everything with their agents. And the whole idea was to just take it over from the inside so that nobody would know that they were at war and being taken over.
It's
And that's
infiltration.
infiltration, yeah. Pretending to be something that they are not. And taking strong advantage of all these useful idiots that we were talking about that really fell for the propaganda, and they did most of the work. All the agents had to do is sit back and write the news articles and teach the kids in school, and then they create useful idiots because they control their minds. It's not that they're idiots, of course. They're very smart people, a lot of them, but their information is all twisted in that same spin from the day they're born. And so the poor people don't have a chance, hardly, to see the reality of what we're talking about.
So again, I had to defect in such a way that my defection would look as simple disappearance. And there were many cases like that when the Soviet agents simply disappeared, either killed in action or, thanks to their curiosity and their close contacts with radicals, some of them were killed by the Marxists, by the way. It happened in many African countries when the Soviet KGB were killed by Africans themselves. Not because they hated Marxism-Leninism, but because they were simply trigger-happy bunch of unruly characters. If you give them a machine gun, they will shoot. And some of the Soviets obviously were not careful enough to protect themselves, and they got into embarrassing situations when they were shot at the crossfire between factions of so-called liberation movements. Anyway, so I decided, as I said, to study the counterculture. I decided this probably would be the best way to disappear. I socialized with characters like this. On the left, you see, he's a barefoot American hippie. It took me quite a long time to study exactly what they were doing and how to mix with them. But eventually I did it. Most of Indian newspapers carried my picture and promise of 2,000 rupees for information about my whereabouts. But they were looking for the wrong person, because they obviously tried to stop a young Soviet diplomat in white shirt and tie, and this is how I looked at the time of defection. Nobody could possibly think that a Soviet diplomat would be as crazy as to join a bunch of hippies.
That's you.
Yes, travel India and smoke hash. So I made it literally almost like a Hollywood-style detective story. From under the nose of the KGB in Bombay airport, I landed the plane and I flew to Greece, where I was debriefed by the CIA. That's basically that's all for my slides.
We can turn off the projector, and that's very interesting. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see, most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
And yet these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place, and
Yes.
who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. They will join the links of dissenters, dissidents.
Yes.
Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their beautiful, noble ideas of equality. This they don't understand, and it will be a greatest shock for them, of course. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So basically America is stuck with demoralization, and unless, even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality back to normalcy and patriotism. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation.
So anyway, back to Yuri, he talked about the importance of that first phase, which was demoralization. And that was basically just to capture the thinking processes of the target nation. And they did that by working on the youth. And he said, okay, after that, then you get to these other phases where you start to infiltrate and dominate control centers, and then finally you get to the crisis stage, which we're talking about here, where all the wheels start coming off, and people are scared to death, and they're looking for any kind of salvation. And now this is when they really reach in and capture control in a violent, sudden move. And then the final phase, of course, I think he called it normalization. Now, normalization is a sarcastic phrase. That means you kill everybody that is opposing you, and then you get back to normal. That's when the tanks come in, and the assassination squads and the firing squads and all of that stuff. And that always happens because they got to get back to normal, as they call it, the new normal. When you hear people talk about the new normal, this is what they're talking about. So Yuri talked about that. It's not a very pretty picture. And back in those days, people would listen to it and they say, gee, that's sort of scary. I don't think that's ever going to happen in America, though. This is America. This is free enterprise. This is capitalism. We're free here. This is the home of the free and the brave. And I kept looking at them like, what are you talking about? Don't you realize that, no, this isn't anymore that way. It used to be, thank God.
It's happening right in front of you. That's what blows my mind with people, Ed. People are like, oh, that couldn't happen right now. It's already happened.
Yeah, I know.
Our doctors are being censored. Our individual journalists are being censored. We're in lockdown because of a virus that is the flu. That's what a coronavirus is. We are, and you know what? everything you said right there, I know that light bulbs are going off with everybody like, oh, we're in that now, we're in that now, we're in
Yeah.
that now, because this is, for the greater good. We're all
Hmm.
locked
Hmm.
down
Yeah.
into our
Hmm.
homes. All the businesses are being destroyed, and
Hmm.
children can't go to school. And, the it's just a nightmare, and it's happening now. And yet there's half the country saying, wear your mask, stay home.
Hmm. Yeah, well, those are the useful idiots. They really think they're doing the right thing. And they're not bad people. I mean, they're good people, most of those. They think they're protecting somebody's life, you know? And they look at people like you and me and think, oh, what kind of terrible people are they? Why don't they know that there's a virus out there, that there's a deadly germ stalking everybody, and if we want to save grandma, we've got to wear a mask. I mean, they really believe it. I don't blame them. I mean, that's all you see on television. I mean, I can't stand to watch television anymore because I know it just lies, 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 lies. Oh my gosh, can't people see it? And the answer is no, they don't, because it's so persistent, it becomes the truth. If you hear something over and over and over again, you believe it. So it made me think, we have a thing called Red Pill University, which I've been building feverishly now for about a year and a half. And I'm always looking for good material to put into it, like videos and audios. And I came across the radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, Orson Welles' War of the World, that they broadcast over radio from New York. I've forgotten the date
When
on
was
that
that, in
one
the
too.
1930s or something like
Yeah,
that?
it was way even back
All right.
probably before I was born. That's way, way back.
Right.
And and so here was this radio broadcast, and they were talking about the invasion from outer space. The Martians were landing all over the world, and they were doing it like a little newscast, part of the story. And we hear that people tuned in and they missed the opening introduction, or they weren't listening carefully when it was announced that this was an enaction of a novel called War of the Worlds, and that it was drama, but it was
This is
just
theater.
so they
Theater.
just theater. So they missed that part, and they tuned in, and they're hearing this guy, say, "Here I am on the rooftop, and oh my God, there's this machine landing down there, and these Martians are coming out, and oh, people are dropping on the streets," and it was all make believe, and it was so believable. and, anyway, I'm going to put that up so people can hear it, because here was something is totally fiction, like Martians landing and people dying on the streets and machines, walking machines all over the world, and people were believing it. You can tell the wildest story, and if you just do it with a straight face, I suppose you can tell anything.
You
Martians are
can.
here.
People believe mainstream media right now.
Yeah.
If it's ABC, NBC, or CBS or CNN,
Yeah.
and half the time Fox, which is, questionable, highly not great anymore. Anyway, it doesn't matter what they say, because it's the source. It's the source now. It doesn't really, to those people who believe mainstream media, whatever I say is just, oh, come on, get away. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
for me, whatever they say, I I know where it comes from, though.
Yeah.
You know what I
You
mean? I
understand? Yeah.
know who owns it and where it's coming from. I
Mm-hmm.
know Associated Press, I know all that stuff. So it's like, because people don't know. Honestly, Ed, I've said it before. They still believe that Walter Cronkite is giving them the news, and I'm come to believe that maybe Walter Cronkite was part of this whole thing. I'm turning into a complete
Well,
conspiracy theorist. I just can't take it anymore. Every time I turn around, it's like, so.
well, people are naive, and I'm not trying to be critical, because I was there. I mean, I spent half. Well, no, not now that I'm a lot older, I probably can't say I spent half of my life there anymore because the lifespan's getting longer. But I spent a lot of years in that state of believing authority. I mean, I was taught that in school. That's one of the major roles of our school system, is to condition students to accept authority without question, and to be a team player. Even if you think it's not the right thing, anyway, be a team player and go along, because we've got to stay united. All these very appealing ideas. Yeah, yeah, be a good team player. Don't rock the boat. We're all in this together, and we have to take care of each other. and all these soft ways of describing giving up your liberty and your individualism to go along with whatever they tell you to do. And so we're trained to do that. and and it leads me, at least, I've learned to be sometimes more skeptical than probably I should be.
Well, I'm
But
very skeptical about why there's a whole lot of literature about this so-called COVID-19 that was written, 10, or
well,
9 years ago. That's what makes me think, well, maybe this really was supposed to be a thing, but it's not a thing. It's not a thing. They're
well,
labeling
but
this year's
both of those
flu,
statements,
right?
could be correct. That this was designed 9 years ago to be not a thing. Think about that, right? It was designed to be theater, in other words. And so to make the theater look good, you have to falsify evidence. I mean, if you're going to convince someone of a crime that never happened, you have to create the evidence. So one of the
Oh,
things
wow.
I,
Say that again. Say that again. That's so key. So this
well,
was
it is key,
designed to
yeah.
be not a thing. This was
Yeah,
just the
designed to be not a
theater,
thing.
the play was written.
Of course, yeah. It's the most obvious answer, but nobody thinks that people could be that clever. That's not clever. That's done all the time. Go to a good football game, and you see a lot of plays that are designed to deceive the opposite team. Statue of Liberty play. They think you're going to throw the ball. You practicing making them think you're going to throw the ball when you're really going to run with it. You see, I mean, people understand that deception is used all the time in business and in sports, but in politics, oh no, they wouldn't do anything deceptive in politics, would they? Come on, world. Yeah, to me, I'm not saying this is true, but the most plausible explanation is that long ago they were figuring, how did we bring this about? Well, the one thing that people could be scared most of is something they couldn't see, like like a spirit, a ghost. If you're scared to death of a ghost, you can't see it, but it's there, right? So you're worried about ghosts. How about a virus? You can't see a virus. If we could just convince everybody that there was a deadly virus, that's just as good as having one, maybe even better, because you yourself then won't be threatened by it. You see, then there's no real threat, but you can get
Right.
everybody else to think that it's real. That's much better than designing a real deadly virus, because if you did that, heck, you might catch it and then you'd be through. Doesn't make sense. And so you plan ahead, years ahead. I'm just speculating now. You plan, how do you convince the world that something exists that doesn't exist? Well, you have to create the evidence. And part of the evidence is to have some laboratory in China that maybe they dropped the ball and it came from bats or something. We talk a lot about how those bad Chinese did it. Well, if there was nothing that was done, it doesn't make any difference who didn't do it. If you tell them the world, you can just
Good
make these
point.
stories up. You can create the evidence to make your story look real. Like the Chinese did it, and we know those guys. Those are bad guys, and sure, that's where this came from. Oh my goodness, we're going to die. It adds authenticity to the myth. So it's not impossible, and so that's how I think. Uh,
So
I
interesting.
uh, I do know. But go back to what we know is that there is no deadly pandemic. And these guys at the top know it, and they planned it. It's worse than that, because I was reading in the paper here, some gal locally went in to take a test, and she filled out the paperwork, and there was a big long line, and she got tired of waiting after an hour. She said, I can't wait here anymore. So she picked up her stuff and went home. And a week later, she got a notice in the mail that she tested positive for coronavirus. This
That's
happens all the time. I mean,
stunning.
it's
Wow.
it is the biggest fraud of all history. And it's hard to see it, because the bigger the fraud is and the more horrible it is, the more difficult it is to believe. Hitler said that. He said, that if you're going to tell a lie, make it a really big one. And because little lies, people will say that's a lie. But the big lie, they can't
Yeah,
imagine.
if there's a massive big lie, people are like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Well, nobody would lie about that.
yeah, like an invasion from Mars. If you turned on your television set and you saw all the newscasters saying and showing pictures and refugees and lines of people escaping the city, and thousands of cars on the freeway escaping out of New York or something, and you get the sound effects and you see people with blood on their face, and what had happened to you? You say, oh my God, the Martians have invaded.
Crisis actors.
Yes, crisis actors. There's a employment agency in London. You can call them up and hire people. I think there's one in New York also. You can hire people to do
I
this.
think we've had a lot of that go on. I want to mention Elon Musk did an experiment where he went to a facility and got himself tested for COVID-19. He did
Hmm.
it 4 times in
Hmm.
1 hour, same nurse, same facility, same testing equipment, everything. He tested positive twice and negative twice in 1 hour.
I rest my case. I mean, this
There
is
you go.
nonsense. The whole thing. Well, it's not nonsense. It is the most. Uh, what is the word? It is evil. It is sinister. This is the most sinister play that's ever been enacted on the stage of mankind. I'll, I don't know whether I want to get into this. How much time do we have left?
You know what? You are G. Edward Griffin. You say we want to hear everything you have to say.
Well, if I keep this up, you won't have any listeners left.
That's okay.
Be
They're-
talking
they'll
to
they'll
you.
they'll come back with a cup of coffee later from what they told me.
Come back with a cup of arsenic. I'm going to end it all. No. Okay. Um, I think people should know that our voting system has been rigged for a long, long time. I don't remember how many years ago, but it's at least 10, maybe 12 years ago, I produced a film called Invisible Ballots. And at that time, I became aware that our voting system electronically was rigged. It's computer. Once they went to computers, they had it locked up because you can program computers very easily. And these computers, we discovered, were designed to be rigged. They had features in them that couldn't be explained for any other reason. And so the whole computerized voting industry, people may have not noticed, but who is building these machines? They're built by companies that are run by known felons. They're built by companies who are closely affiliated with the elitists. They're built by companies that you wouldn't trust to sit your baby. I mean, the people that run these companies, and most of them are outside of the United States, by the way. In fact, they all are. All of the machines, and now we learn that the software that counts the votes is even outside of the United States, in the hands of people that you never heard of, and we have no control over. We have no way of seeing what they're doing. And they're the ones that not only build the machines, but actually count the votes. All the software feeds back to them in Spain or in China or someplace like that. And then
Or
the numbers,
Germany, we're hearing now.
or Germany, yeah.
Yes.
It's not the United States. And then the numbers come back to the CBS or the NBC newsroom, and they go up on the screen and so forth, and the numbers are flashing around. And nobody ever thinks, where are these numbers coming from? I'm here to tell you, the short version, they're rigged. Those numbers are completely false, and that's been that way since the certainly since the last election. Anyway, there's a lot of evidence to that effect, and you'll be seeing that at Red Pill University. The people who were involved in these machines. I have to tell you that there's this one guy was hired by Broward County. Was it? Anyway, I've forgotten what county in Tennessee. He was a programmer, and he was called in to see if he could see if there was any evidence that the vote machines were rigged. And he came in, he said, oh, no way you can rig a vote machine. I mean, they wouldn't, that would be so much security built into a vote machine, no way. But he started to look at it, and he said, this is interesting. What? Well, this is interesting. And all of a sudden, he said, my God, what are these things doing in, say, these program features? And we sit there and watch this young fellow with a laptop computer working on a voting machine that was used in the 2016 election. And he has access to every precinct, every county and every precinct in the United States at his fingertips. And within 3 minutes, he can change the vote of any candidate or any ballot position in the United States in 3 minutes and produce a feathered out report on a 1,000-page report that shows all the different variables and everything. It all comes out looking slick, clean, official as it can be. And he did it and right before your eyes. You can see the original, and then would do it again with the rigging. And it takes, well, for just the rigging, it takes about a minute and a half. And okay, what's my point? My point is nobody in today's world wins an election unless they want him to win the election. You think your vote counts? It does not, unless they make a mistake. And sometimes they make mistakes. And I think that's why they also have the paper ballots ready to come in. If they can't rig this thing fast enough, or there's something happened and it's not working, maybe the communications are down, then they can bring in a truckload of paper ballots. I mean, they're covered it both ways. They're not going to lose the election, you can be sure. So the point is, whoever gets the votes, the winning vote, is because these people we're talking about want them to.
You know? So interesting. You know what? I have to have you back like next week to do another 2 hours.
Well, see, what I'm saying is really bad news, because this shatters one's serenity, let's say, to think that for a long time now, our vote has not been counted correctly. Yeah.
Well, you know what? This has been an amazing interview. It's always such an honor to have you here. Please tell everyone where they can go to follow your work. Talk to everybody about the Red Pill.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm really putting most of my effort, as much as I can, into redpilluniversity.org. That's where everything we're talking about that I can document in any way is going into redpilluniversity.org. Then we have Need to Know News, which is a free news service. You can sign up for that. We put new editions out 3 times a week, and I pour my heart into that all the time, trying to write up my own little understanding and explanation of the news of the day that's critical to our issues. So we got a lot of things going on, but the place to start, I would say, is redpilluniversity.org.
What's your prediction on when this COVID-19 mask lockdown scenario is going to end? Do you have a prediction?
No, I don't. I think it's got to come from people power, because the ones at the top are too vested in this game.
So you think this could go on for years if no one stood up to them?
Oh, if no one stands up to them and makes it just impossible or extremely difficult to continue, it'll go on forever. That'll be how they'll control people. Forever. That'll be the mechanism through their health. They'll all be on vaccines, and the ones that cause problems will just have a bad batch of vaccines, I guess, and they won't last very long.
I just wondered if you ever saw a point where the United States would come out and say, oh, everything's fine.
Oh, I think it's going to come if we do our job. I just don't know when. That depends on you and me, I guess. We
Okay.
have to work harder, stronger, and longer, and smarter.
That's okay, great. Ed, thank you so much for coming on this show today. We're going to have you back very, very soon as this goes one way or the other.
Well, if you still have a show after this one, I mean,
Right. They're dropping like flies.
Anyway, you're a very courageous lady if you're going to put this all up and say, I still like the guy in spite of all this.
We adore you. You have a wonderful day. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you, Michelle, and good luck to you.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
Bye-bye.
G. Edward Griffin, writer, filmmaker, chairman of the Red Pill Expo, and the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. For the Industry Experts Panel, I'm Michelle Holliday at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com.